During our 2 years of writing and researching the lore of the Lands Between, we've touched on the histories of every Tarnished that can be encountered on our journey. Heroic figures like Vargrim the Raging Wolf and Vike, villains such as Anastasia Tarnished Eater and the Dung Eater, even bystanders like Roderica. We have told all of their stories in an attempt to flesh out the world of Elden Ring, all except for one. While we've touched on his influence in the Lands Between, there's one Tarnished whose life we've never explored from beginning to end. This fierce warrior was so powerful, he brought every enemy he faced to their knees. He led Queen Marika's conquest across the Lands Between, and took the throne as the very first Elden Lord. This myth of a man had his throne torn from him, and his people banished, but still he persevered, eventually making his way back to the royal capital, so he could reclaim what he once won through sheer strength. We speak, of course, of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Today, we will tell the tale of the First Tarnished. Welcome back to the Elden Lore series, where we explore the many people, places, and monsters of the Lands Between, telling their stories so you don't have to do all of the lore digging by yourself. If this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome. We're happy you're choosing to spend some time with us. With over 100 episodes in this series, we're sure you'll find the explanations you are looking for, and if not, you can always request lore topics in our comments. If you end up liking our videos, please consider subscribing to the channel, so we can continue to grow the incredible community we've been cultivating. Thanks again for stopping by, and with that said, let's get back to the story at hand. The early life of Godfrey, or rather Hoarah Loux, is a mystery. We know only that he was a fierce warrior whose strength stood above all others. We know, thanks to the axe of Godfrey, that in past days a crown was warranted with strength. So we have to assume it was his unbelievable strength that led Marika to choose him as her champion, with the goal of conquering the Lands Between. In the spirit of his new life as her champion, he took the name Godfrey and put aside the name Hoarah Loux, as he needed a lordly name for once he sat upon the Elden Throne. The incantation Protection of the Erd Tree tells us, in the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erd Tree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. It was Godfrey's duty as consort to Marika to lead her forces to victory during these countless battles. While many were likely fought that we have no record of, the first war we can trace back to Godfrey is the war against the Giants. During this time, he led Marika's forces into the consecrated snowfield to defeat those who worship the fell god, the only beings capable of harming the fledgling Erd Tree with their fire. We can hear words of inspiration that Marika spoke to Godfrey and the army he led during this time by visiting the first church of Marika.
Hark, brave warriors. Hark, my lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erd Tree.
A sword monument near the giant conquering hero's grave tells the story of this battle. The war against the giants. Champions battle, trolls betray, fire vanquished. The era of the Erd Tree begins. This time is also referred to as the birth of the Erd Tree by smithing stones, solidifying that this victory is where Godfrey helped establish the birth of the Golden Order, where Erd Tree supremacy began and would spread through the land. It was during this war that the giants were all but extinguished, leaving only one behind. The remembrance of the fire giant explains why he still lives to this day. The fire giant is a survivor of the war against the giants. Upon realizing the flames of their forge would never die, Queen Marika marked him with a curse. "O trifling giant, mayest thou tend thy flame for eternity. So it was that Godfrey's march of conquest began in earnest, although his first victory was not as crushing as he had thought, as while he defeated the giants, their fell god lived on through the last surviving member of their species. The sheer number of battles Godfrey faced is unconfirmed, but we can nail down some of them based on information that can be gathered across the lands between. We know that before he faced the Stormlord, Godfrey fought a battle against Sarosh thanks to Godfrey's icon. Godfrey was a ferocious warrior. When he vowed to become a lord, he took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back to suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within. In fact, it's possible that his battle with Sarosh took place even before the war against the giants, as Marika was already referring to him as Godfrey at this time. So we believe that he was already suppressing his true strength during his entire conquest of the lands between. There was also the siege of Castle Morn, which is commemorated by a sword monument. The siege of Castle Morn, a lone hero fights for his vengeance, only to fall at the hand of Lord Godfrey. While we have no idea who this hero was, we know that this castle was taken and added to the many lands under Marika's control. While the true identity of the Stormlord is widely debated, we also know, thanks to the Elden Lord crown, that Godfrey faced him alone, without his armies. Armor of Godfrey, the First Elden Lord. The Age of the Erdtree began amongst conflict, when Godfrey was lord of the battlefield. He led the war against the giants, faced the Stormlord alone, and then there came a moment where his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. There is one last sword monument commemorating the battles of Godfrey near the smoldering church in Limgrave, and while we can't know who he was fighting, we know that it must have been his last worthy enemy, as the monument reads, Lord Godfrey, at last at the end of his campaign, his golden armies unvanquished and unbowed, yet finds grace lost, tattered and faded. This was the last battle he fought before he was ultimately stripped of grace. In order for the timeline of the Lands Between to work, we have to assume that between his many battles and conquests, Godfrey led some kind of life as ruler of the Lands Between, alongside Queen Marika. It was during this time that they started a family. Their first son was born, Godwyn the Golden, a shining boy who presumably shared the appearance of his mother, with her long golden hair, but the fierce spirit of his father, as he went on to lead the capital in the fight against the dragons. Then came the Omen twins, Morgott and Mohg. Godfrey likely saw no issue with his sons being born Omen, as he valued strength above all else, and in his eyes, the primordial crucible was nothing to be ashamed of. After all, his elite force of warriors were the Crucible Knights, knights who drew upon the power of the crucible itself. However, Marika saw the Omen as a blight on the Golden Order, and if she had her way, I doubt the twins would have survived long after their birth. We believe that the reason noble children born Omen did not have their horns removed is because Godfrey did not want to risk the death of his boys, acting against the wishes of his queen, and instead placing the Omen twins underground where they would serve a purpose and grow strong through the years. We have to assume he instilled a sense of dignity in them, as even though Morgott saw himself as wholly unworthy of the Elden Throne, he used his strength to lead Leyndell from the shadows after the Shattering, taking on the duties that should have fallen to his other siblings, should they not have betrayed the royal crown by warring with each other. Upon resting at various churches in the Lands Between, Melina shares the story of when grace was taken from Godfrey and he became the very first Tarnished.
My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the Lands Between. Ye will wage war in a land afar, where ye will live and die. Well, perhaps that might serve you in lieu of a maiden's guidance. Then, After thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
Say what you will of Marika's machinations. Personally, we believe she always intended for a new Elden Lord to rise from the Tarnished, to break free of the Greater Will. But her declarations are what set Godfrey on a new path, the long march through the Badlands. Godfrey's axe tells us more about this time in his life. Weapon of Godfrey, Elden Lord. It was broken in a battle fought as leader of the Tarnished during the Long March. This weapon is symbolic of Godfrey's vow to conduct himself as a lord, later becoming an emblem of the Golden Lineage. In the days of the past, a crown was warranted with strength. Marika's words seem to have come true, as during the Long March, Godfrey and his Tarnished faced countless battles, growing stronger with each victory. However, at some point, Godfrey did indeed die at the hands of some unnamed foe, as we can see in the intro cinematic of Elden Ring that he is bloodied, defeated, and hanging on a tree, much in the same way Marika came to be strung up in the Ur Tree, both spreading their arms, crucified by their enemies. It's also worth noting that during this time, it seems Sarosh never left Godfrey's side, meaning that he never fought with all of his strength. This likely means that Godfrey never once wavered in his dedication to being seen as a lord, and keeping his lust for battle in check. We believe that after his defeat, the Tarnished that marched alongside him went their separate ways, some staying in the Badlands and continuing the traditions of their lord, while others set off for new lands, prepared to someday be called back to the lands between to fulfill their duty. Sometime later, Godfrey awoke alongside his fellow Tarnished and made his way to the capital city of Leyndell. We can only imagine what must have gone through his head as he saw what his kingdom was reduced to, what the infighting of his family had done to the land he conquered. He marched back to Leyndell, axe in hand, ready to meet his sons and possibly even his wife. But all he found upon his arrival was the corpse of his beloved Morgott and the Tarnished who had put him to the sword.
It's been a long while, Morgott. Long and hard didst thou fight, tarnished warrior, spurned by the grace of gold. Be assured the Elden Ring resteth close at hand. Alas, I am returned. To be granted audience once more. Upon my name as Godfrey, the First Elden Lord.
It was then that a thrilling battle ensued where Godfrey would show us his might as the First Elden Lord. But he could not win as he was. Drastic measures needed to be taken.
I've given thee courtesy enough. Now I fight as Hoarah Loux. Warrior!
Tearing Sarosh from his back unleashed the sheer, unbridled power of Hoarah Loux, the warrior that had once charmed Queen Marika with his strength, proving himself to be the champion she needed to conquer the lands between. But even this would not be enough to stop our Tarnished on their quest. It would be here that Godfrey ultimately meets his end, telling us our strength befits a crown, and finally falling in battle, permanently. The question of whether or not Godfrey knew of Queen Marika's intentions when she banished him is up for debate. We see and hear precious little from the First Elden Lord. It's possible that if Marika planned the events of the Shattering, as so many believe she did, that Godfrey was actually working alongside her. Perhaps the idea that the Tarnished were the only warriors who could ultimately fell the Elden Beast came from Godfrey himself. As a warrior, he understood the importance of strength, and that it could only be gained through countless battles and hardships. Nothing in the lore of the game suggests that Godfrey resented Marika for her decision to banish him, nor does he speak ill of her when we meet him. Perhaps the First Elden Lord knew all along. After all, thanks to Melina, we know that at some point, Queen Marika said this:
I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
If these words came before Godfrey's exile, then it's possible she discovered the truth of the Elden Beast and saw the need to break free from it, leading to her decision to banish Godfrey and set their plan in motion. If this is true, it means that Godfrey, the First Elden Lord, knew the truth of his journey from the very start and played a part in orchestrating a future where one of his people, a Tarnished, would someday sit upon the Elden Throne. That is, if they could prove themselves superior to the greatest warrior the land had ever seen, Hoarah Loux. Thank you for joining us for the story of Godfrey, the First Elden Lord and Chieftain of the Badlands. What do you think of our theory on Godfrey's involvement in Marika's plans? Were the events of Elden Ring orchestrated by the original rulers of the lands between? Or was much of what we experienced left to chance? Did Godfrey take Sarosh upon his back before or after the war with the giants? Who was the Storm Lord, and who did Godfrey face as his final battle just outside of Caelid? There are many mysteries around the time Godfrey served as Elden Lord, so feel free to share your thoughts, theories, and questions in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.